In this presentation, we will continue importing our service items into QuickBooks Online. Here we are in our Get Great Guitars file. Last time we were importing our information into the service items so we can help to populate our invoice and our sales receipt, and in doing so, we had listed out our items in this format. So this is the things that we're going to sell in terms of service items. We'll do inventory items later. We have now populated them into our Excel worksheet. We're going to use the Excel worksheet to bulk upload then into the QuickBooks Online system. So I'm going to go ahead and close this, and then I'm going to go into the importing fields in QuickBooks. And that's going to be on the Sales tab. We're going to go to the Sales tab. We want to be on the Product and Services. So the only things we have in here now are these three items that are in there by default. Now we're going to go up top. Instead of entering new and doing this one at a time, which you could do, that'd be fine. But if you had a lot of them, and this would be similar for if you had customers or vendors, we're going to select the drop down and have an importing type of feature. So we're going to import then. We already took a look at the practice file. You want to line it up to the practice file as much as possible, but we've input the information into our columns. We're then going to browse and look for that Excel file and import it. So here's my file. It's going to be an Excel file. I called it invoice or service items, I should say. I called it service items. I'm going to double click on that and open that item. And then I'm going to go down to the right and we're going to say next. And now we're on step 2, which is going to be the mapping of the data. So basically QuickBooks is saying, hey, look, these are our header fields. We're going to try to match up the header fields to the headers that we found in your Excel file. In other words, the header fields in the Excel file were the bolded items. So they're going to try to say, hey, does this bolded item line up to our header field if it's not, the exact same name? So we're going to go, all right, we have the product or service, which we called the item name. So that lines up. We got the item name is the product or service. In other words, they're calling it product or service. We called it the item name, and those two things are tying out. So we're going to say, all right, that's okay. And then we have nothing here, no match. And then the type. So on the type, we have the type. So that should match up because we picked up the type, which should be the service item type. And then we have the sales description. So sales description lines up exactly. So that's the sales description title, which lines up to their title of the sales description. The sales price, where they have the sales price rate, and we just put sales price. And notice they were able to pick that up. That's close enough. They were able to pick that up. And then we have the income account, and we have the income account here. So we have the income account. So that looks good. So the data that we have then, it has been populated. Notice we're not populating every field. Didn't populate because we only had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 columns, and you could possibly have had all of these columns. And then we didn't have the exact name, but the QuickBooks was able to match up our header columns with the appropriate header columns within QuickBooks. So we're going to say that looks good. Then I'm going to go to the next item. Obviously, if none of this lined up, then we can delete it and we can try to rename our header columns, and it's not imported, in other words, until we get through the importing process. So then we're going to go to next. Now we're on the import screen. Obviously, we see some red here. Red's not typically good, so we're going to have to adjust the red item. So let's see what it picked up. So this is the data input that we put in place, only 5 columns. We have more columns here. Do we need those? Let's take a look at it. So these are going to be items that we sell, so we're checking them all off because we sell these items. We don't buy these items because they're service items, so we're not going to buy them. We're not going to track them. They're not inventory items. We have the name, diagnostic, hour service, partial, and so on and so forth. If you wanted to make this column a little bit larger so you could see that, you have the same kind of method with Excel. And so there's those. That looks good. This is going to be the SKU, which is the stock keeping unit. We don't have one because they're service items. Then the type is going to be service versus non-inventory. Service and non-inventory. We're going to keep the service item here. And notice you only have the 2 options. You're going to say, well, where's the inventory items option and whatnot? They're not there because we didn't say that we're going to buy or track them, which you would be doing if you had inventory items. So therefore, it would think that it would be a non-inventory physical units that you're not going to track or service. Then we have the sales description, and again, you could see this a little bit more if you were to widen the column here, which is a little touchy, but it's going to work in the same way as Excel, and that's going to be the same as the name. Then we have the sales price, picked up the sales price well. Then the problem is this income account. We named it the service because in our prior software, we're imagining it came over from the service income. In other words, what income account is going to be hit when we create an invoice with this service item in it. And we don't have it. They're saying, hey, we don't have an account called service income. So we're going to say, all right, well, let's see what they got. Let's see if we need to make up a new account. Let's see the drop down. And I'm going to say, let's look at a revenue account. We're looking at revenue or income accounts. We have this one. That's called it's an income type of account. That's what I'm looking at. It needs to be an income type of account. So we have the billable expense account. No, that doesn't seem right. Sales or income? Maybe. Sale of product income? No, because we're not selling products. And uncategorized income. Of the three, these two look most appropriate. This one, we might want to rename for service income or something like that, because sales kind of seems to indicate products, you would think. And we already have a product income account here. So I'm going to choose this one and then consider renaming it. And I'm just going to do that for all of these. I want to say, hey, I want this one to go to sales income instead of what we put in the income account here of just service income. And so I'm going to say that's got to be picked up sales income and sales income. Then we have the expense account. So the expense account defaulted to here, the purchase expense. Now it doesn't really matter because we're not buying any of these things because we're talking about service items. And then the quantity should be 0 because again, we don't have any. There is no quantity on hand. These aren't inventory units. So 0 would be appropriate there. There is no reorder point because we're not reordering them. Inventory asset account, again, there is no inventory asset account. We don't have any inventory here. And then the as of date, the quantity on hand, there is nothing on hand. Therefore, the date that it's on hand doesn't matter. Now, when we get to the inventory accounts, all of these will matter more, right? Now, these have red around it. Notice if I just click on it, it seems to take the red away. So I'm going to go through there and say, I hope that's okay, because you would think those would all be 0 fields. So everything looks appropriate to me here. Everything looks okay. So now I'm just going to go back and forth. Everything looks okay. Now I'm going to import it. Now, when you import it, of course, this is kind of like the finalizing feature that, so you want to be careful with it. There's only what do we have here? 4 items here. So it wouldn't be too bad if we had to go back in and delete those. But if you had to go back in and delete, a lot more items, it would be something that would take a significant amount of time. So you want to make sure at this point then, before importing, you're going to say everything looks good. I'm going to go ahead and then import. And notice it didn't bounce back to this screen. I'm still on the import screen and it made these red again. And I'm like, I don't like that. What happened? But before I delete anything or import it again, what I want to do is check the other field. Now, I wouldn't just X out of something when this happens, because we could just open another window. So what I'd like to say is, well, could I open another window and see if everything works before I delete anything or import it twice or something like that? So what I'm going to do then is go up top and I'm going to right click up here and I want to duplicate the tab and see if I can go check in on this without getting out of that prior screen or importing 2 times or doing anything. Don't do anything drastic here, right? We're going to go down to the sales. We're in the sales tab. We're in the product and services. And then you'll recall we only had 3 items before. We had the hours, the late and whatnot. And now these did seem to import, right? We have the diagnostic, we have the hour service, we have the partial service, and so on. If you wanted to edit any of these individually, then you can go into the edit tab over here and we can say, let's edit these items. And then you'll see the editing screen, the category, and so on. And note, this would be similar to kind of like the input screen that you would have if you were doing this one by one, right? You got the name, and then you have the SKU, which is going to be the stock keeping unit, which we don't have here. Then we have a category if we were to add categories. We don't have any here. And then we have the description. I sell this product service to my customers. We've got the name. And then we have the sales price that populated here, and then the income account, right? That we have to select the account that's going to be affected when we make the sale. And then this one would be, I purchased this product service from a vendor. No, because this is going to be an inventory item. So I'm going to close this back out. And so those look like they populated. Here's the sales price. Everything looks okay. Let's now check an invoice. So we'll go up top to the plus button up here, and we're going to take a look at another invoice. So we're going to go to the send invoice. And now if we imagine someone putting this together, we're just going to say, hey, we did this service. And they're going to go, all right, the bookkeeper can just go down here and say, it's going to be, you know, an hour service, or let's say it was a tune-up, right? They can just say, oh, it's a tune-up. And then they can just click on the tune-up, and there it is, and just say how many tune-ups there were. We're going to say 1, and the rate is $200, and it'll populate the whole thing for them. So notice how easy that is to set up. We can now imagine someone being able to do the bookkeeping process very easily by simply knowing what the service item is. What's going to happen when they actually create this invoice? What's the journal entry behind this now? It's going to be debiting or increasing the accounts receivable because it's an invoice. The other side is going to go to revenue or sales. That's why we had to choose that sales account. So it's going to be increasing the income account of sales by the $200. And, you know, that's going to be the two sides that are affected. Now, it'll be more complicated when we deal with the inventory, because then you'll have the cost of goods sold, possibly sales tax, and the inventory that will also be affected when you create that invoice. So I'm not going to record this now. I'm going to close this, and I'm going to say, do you want to leave without saving? I'm going to say yes. We don't want to record anything yet. We don't have anything recorded yet. We just set up the items so that we can record in the future. Next time, we're going to come back in here and we'll do a similar process, but this time looking at inventory items to import, which are a bit more complicated.